Emulators are essential to game preservation, and for good reason. Could you imagine a world without them?
Once the original hardware stops working, there would be no way to play some of the most influential games of all time. For example, GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64, a game that is almost impossible to re-release officially due to its ties with Nintendo, Microsoft, who bought Rareware, the company who made this game in 2001, and the James Bond license.
Anyway, got a bit off topic there. Emulators. They work by, well, emulating the system's hardware and firmware to make sure that the games, the software, can run on them.
They take stupid amounts of time to develop and are made by fans most of the time. Fans that, while being very knowledgeable on the system, didn't actually make it and have very little means to know how it works. So, most of the time, it's just educated guesses and reverse engineering. This means that it can take years or even decades to get games running at all on these emulators.
Though the companies who originally made the hardware often don't care for the importance to preservation or the immense man-hours that are poured into making these projects. They just pronounce them illegal.
I'm sorry, Nintendo, but emulators are legal, and that was settled in court years ago. The people that make and use these emulators have to thread a fine line between the preservation of media and piracy. Piracy being the stealing of digital media and distributing it for free. There are many heated debates to be found on the internet about whether game emulation is piracy or preservation.
Personally, I am in the camp of the latter. Games differ in that way from movies or music, in that they can be played on virtually anything as long as you have the files, but for games you need that specific piece of hardware to even be able to play them.
And without emulation, that would stay that way. But no electronics last forever, so it is more important than ever to not only preserve the games themselves, but also to reproduce the hardware while we can. Just as an aside before we start the tutorial, an emulator is not the same as a ROM. A ROM is the game file itself and is useless without the hardware/emulator that is required to play it.
With all that being said, how do you install one of these emulators, you may ask? Well, it's actually pretty simple. First, you want to know what console you are going to emulate. If you have any game ROMs handy, I'd recommend getting the emulator for that console.
Here's a little chart with what those file types may mean. If you don't have any, there are a couple I'd recommend. While it's usually best to get an emulator specific to your console, the main one that supports the most consoles is RetroArch. RetroArch is also one of the simplest emulators to use, as it has an entire interface very much like the PlayStation 3. Do not be fooled, however. RetroArch cannot emulate PlayStation 3 games. The PS3 had a special architecture, making emulation very hard, and only a couple of games currently work. But it can emulate almost anything from before them. Here's the full list of supported consoles if you're interested. Fun fact, it turns out that during the planning of this video, RetroArch got a Steam release. If you want the simplest possible way to emulate stuff, this ought to be it. I will still be going over the normal way of installation in case you want to use that or are downloading a specific console emulator, but here's a quick overview of the Steam version. Download Steam from store.steampower.com by clicking the small green Install Steam button on the top, go through the installer and make a Steam account. Once on the main store page, search for RetroArch and click Install. After the download, it should be ready to go. If you downloaded through Steam and want to know how to add games, skip to this timestamp for that process. If you want to install normally, it's, to be honest, not that much more difficult than the Steam method. First, go to the download page on RetroArch.com, then select your platform of choice. I'll be going over the Windows 10 version installation and the Mac one for good measure. If you're a Linux user, why are you watching a tutorial on this? You clearly know more than I do. Go use your package manager or something. Also, yes, the Windows 98 version does work. Here it is running on the metal. If you're already running Windows 11, the Windows 10 install should just work. I haven't tested it, but it probably runs just fine. Kinda shows how lazy a release Windows 11 really is, doesn't it? Also, I won't be going over the mobile platforms because downloading it is stupid easy on the Android Google Play Store, but pretty tough on iOS because Apple hates fun and doesn't allow for side-loading apps. Also, who plays emulated games on mobile? Anyway, once you're on the download page, you can look for the operating system you're currently using. There's a ton of stuff here, but I don't think you'll be running RetroArch on GameCube anytime soon.
Now please check your wallet. If there is any money in there, please select the Windows 10 version. If there is not, please select the macOS version. I just, of course, I shouldn't make these kinds of jokes. This is a tutorial. On a more serious note, I hope you know which one you're running. For both cases, you'll need to check a couple of things. If you're on Windows 10, you can check in the settings by searching for your specifications if your Windows version is 64-bit or 32-bit. If you're on Windows 11, it's always going to be 64-bit since the 32-bit version was axed for Windows 11. Then you choose the installer of that type.
If you're on macOS, you'll see two different versions. This is because Apple recently switched their chip architecture from Intel's x86 chips to their own ARM-based processors. I'd recommend just googling your model, as I don't exactly know where to look to check that, as I don't use macOS. Probably in the settings menu or by searching specifications in the Spotlight search. Once your version of choice has downloaded in your browser of choice, it is as simple as just opening it and going through the installer. It asks you to close your applications. If you want that, you can, but to be honest, it doesn't make much of a difference. If you have an afternoon to spare, you can read the user license agreement. Or if you're sane, you just click accept. Guys, it's open source. The code is literally open to the public. It's trustworthy. Then you choose your destination folder. After that, it's going to ask you to install DirectX. If you don't already have it, it is heavily recommended that you do download this, as it can make a surprising difference in performance. Just choose the default start menu folder and click next. After popping the kettle on, it will be done and you'll have a cup of tea ready. Win-win in my opinion.
Oh yeah, be a dear, will you, and don't install the Bing bar. It'll save Microsoft the awkwardness of remembering that the Bing bar still exists. What even is a Bing bar? I don't know what a Bing bar is. Like, I know what Bing is, I don't know what a Bing bar is. It has something to do with Bing.
Well, now you have RetroArch installed. Go to the location you put it, or to any of the shortcuts that you made. You can even search for it in the start menu. Once you've opened the program, you still can't really do anything with it. You might also notice the theming looks more like the Nintendo Switch UI than the PlayStation 3 right now. If you want to change, that's also pretty easy. Go into Drivers menu and choose the XMB option. After quickly restarting the program, you'll see the iconic PlayStation 3 UI, but we still haven't really done anything, have we? Well, fear not, as you can just select Load Core, Download Core, and then the specific system you want to emulate. For simplicity's sake, I'll select a PlayStation 1 emulator, DuckStation to be specific. If you now click Show Desktop menu, you'll see this menu pop up. On the left here, you can right-click and add a new playlist. A bit of an odd name, but this is where we'll be adding our games to. The reason it's called this is because RetroArch can also just play media like movies and music. I'd recommend naming this playlist according to the console that you'll be adding, so in my case, I'll just call it PS1. Now, with that playlist selected, this is an important detail, in the middle box, right-click and select Add Folder. Now, you need to add the folder that you keep your ROMs in. Now, I've not yet said how to get your hands on one of these ROMs, and that's because that is another legally dubious part of the process. You can either get some device to rip actual game cartridges, hack a game device with an OS like the Nintendo DS or PlayStation Portable, use RetroArch or some other program to rip a disc game, or download them from the internet. How much I may disagree on this, downloading games on the internet for preservational and nostalgic purposes is currently illegal. This means I will not tell you where to get one, and I will also not encourage you to go blindly looking for them. There are plenty of sites that say they have a ROM, but when you download it, they just give you an executable file.
Do not ever, and I repeat, never open an exe file from an untrustworthy source.
Retro games like these are usually in file formats like .NES or .ISO, so exe files should be taken with caution.
That leaves the stupidest source of semi-trustworthy game ROMs to be the Pirate Bay.
Yar, fiddle indeed. Being a pirate is a wretched deed. Do what you want, cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate. You are a pirate.
Anyway, that's about it for the basics. If you want to add other games, you can choose a different emulator, throw some different games in another playlist, and you're off. I hope you don't mind me recommending some games as well, because the task of finding good stuff may be a bit daunting. If you haven't played a Metroid game before, Metroid Zero Mission is a great place to start. This is a Game Boy Advance remake of the original Metroid game on NES. It's pretty hand-holding, it has an easy mode, and is one of the shorter games. In terms of 2D platformers, you can't go wrong with some Yoshi's Island. Though it can get a bit tough at the end, this is still one of the best 2D platformers out there. If you want a platformer with a 3D variety though, go play Banjo-Kazooie. Do it! On shooters, there are plenty. The original Doom, for example. Perhaps a bit graphically limited, sure, but it is still a good game. Also, go play Zelda game, will you? They're good. Not the CDI ones, but I doubt you'll be playing them anyway.
Join me, Link, and I will make your face the greatest in Korodai, or else you will die.
Anyway, that's about all. If you're not really sure what core you should use for each console, I'll link this Reddit thread below. It has a lot of opinions from a lot of different people running a lot of different hardware.
I hope you enjoyed this little guide. I don't do stuff like this often, but game preservation is going to be more important than ever in the future, and alongside a rewrite of copyright law to fit better in the modern era,
making emulation and all of its elements legal is one of my biggest hopes in the future of digital media preservation in every sense of the word. Websites like archive.org are already doing God's work in this department, which is great to see.
What about now? It's time to rock with the biggest.
Thanks for watching to the end. I hear rumors if you like and subscribe, you'll get a cookie. I don't know about you, but I'm doing it right away.
To the bump, to the bump, to the bump, to the bump, to the bass.